of pitched how to host a community Bioblitz and thinking about kind of upskilling yourself in data capture and connecting people to nature. So this is a really simple, fun way of kind of seeing what's living in the community. And I strongly believe that people will only start to protect the nature if they kind of understand what it is, what's there, and what value it has. So this is a really good introduction for people who might not have really experienced what wildlife there is in their own kind of backyards. So you don't have to be an expert to host a community Bioblitz, and you know, it really is an accessible, fun way that's relatively simple to set up, and hopefully will kind of get the imaginations of community going, and hopefully that will lead to more further participation in the other community engagement projects that you're doing. Sorry, my glass is really reflective, but I just have to cope with that. So this is what we'll be covering. So I'll do a very brief Wildlife Warden scheme update, just sort of tell you what we're doing and the sorts of things which I can help you with as the Mid Devon Wildlife Warden scheme coordinator. Then kind of thinking about why community engagement is important. You know, why do we need to engage the community? What do we get from it? What does nature get from it? Then coming on to what exactly is a Bioblitz and how it can be useful. And then the real kind of crux of it is sort of different ways you can host a Bioblitz, and an introduction to iNaturalist, which is an app which you may or may not have experienced, but it's a way of capturing species information kind of from your smartphone in a way that's kind of accessible and friendly to people who have the kind of most basic interest, but is also used for by kind of environmental professionals as well. So it has the capability should you want to use it. And then kind of a few final points on things to remember when hosting a community event like a Bioblitz, and then a few ideas on what I can do to support you. I'm really keen to kind of get this stuff going. I know there's quite a short timeline really when it comes to Bioblitzing, because we're coming towards the end of the survey season, which is why I just wanted to get this training in kind of post haste, so that if you wanted to do a community Bioblitz, you could kind of do it whilst the weather's good and whilst people are thinking about outdoor living, and it's much easier at this point in the year. But it is something which can be done any time of the year in any space. So the Mid Devon Wildlife Warden scheme concentrates on these 4 focus areas: so nature, gardens, public spaces, and farming. And there's a whole host of ways that the Mid Devon Wildlife Warden scheme can support you in these areas on a kind of parish basis. So as individuals, as part of your community and your parish, and then idea sharing across the different parishes in these areas. So anything from species counts to thinking about sustainable gardening, to thinking about how we can engage more with farmers, and also kind of improving our public spaces with nature in mind. So this is me, I'm a coordinator for Mid Devon Wildlife Warden scheme. It's also kind of important to note that the Mid Devon Wildlife Warden scheme has been funded by National Lottery Community Fund and various other smaller funds, and it comes under the umbrella of New Prosperity Devon. And there's kind of experienced members of NPD who act as the steering group for the Mid Devon Wildlife Warden scheme. So it is a structured scheme which has more minds than just mine at the fore, but I'm promoting it and working with parishes across Mid Devon district. So in terms of thinking about what is a Bioblitz? I mean, it's quite a snappy name, and you might have heard of the expression a few times. I know that sometimes at National Trust Properties and Devon Wildlife Trust and well-known organisations like that try to use it as a community engagement tool. Essentially, it's a really simple way to engage the community simply by seeing how many species there are in a given space. So we'll talk in a little bit about the different ways that you can approach it, but basically it's just communing or doing it remotely, identifying a particular space which you want to see what species are in it, and just seeing what's there. So it's a very, very simple thing to do. And it's not a kind of perfect mechanism by any means. For example, there might be some double counting. If a butterfly flies from one end of the area to another, and someone might count it twice, for example. But for the purposes of community engagement and collecting an idea of what species are there rather than how many, it is a really, really useful tool. So these are the different ways that it is useful. So anyone can get involved in it. This is a picture of all the people who came along to the Tiverton Tree Team launch of a community orchard, and having an event which focuses the community, gives them something to do, makes them feel like they are upskilled and can do something themselves relatively easily. So the app that I'm going to be talking through is completely free of charge. It gives you wildlife guides and keys to follow. It allows you to record sort of sounds of species and identify them. It gives you pictures of guides of, you know, exactly what it might be if you add a description. So it's very, very user-friendly, and it means that anyone from children who might need a little bit of guidance but can get the idea of it really quickly, to people who've got years and years of experience and might just be interested in seeing exactly what's there. So it's a really inclusive way of doing that and kind of giving things a bit of a boost. Obviously, there's a connection to nature, sort of satisfying that sense of wonderment and backing it up with citizen science is a really good way of engaging people. So you could do this on a really simple scale. So anything from looking at your churchyard or your village green to looking at the parish, you know, in its entirety. There's loads of different ways that you can approach a Bioblitz. The simplest being, let's invite the whole parish to, you know, a little thing with some refreshments. In this 1 hour of the day, we're going to be looking to see what we're going to find in our village green or in a churchyard. And that can be a really great way of collecting data as well as connecting to nature and be having some community engagement. So pretty useful. I've touched on some of these already, but there's lots of different ways that you can be imaginative about hosting a Bioblitz. So like I said, you can do a live Bioblitz, so getting people physically there on a particular date at a particular time to see what species are in existence in that relatively small patch of land, for example, the churchyard. And I think it's also a really good way of kind of positively engaging people about what there is to protect. So any wilding project in a churchyard, for example, it gives it a bit more gravitas. If you know that you've got some species in there which need protection or need sort of particular conditions for it to thrive, kind of gives your argument, or not argument, but your case a little bit more gravitas. And supports the cause. So you can always do it in a walk, you could say to people, okay, in that popular walk in your village in the months of, I don't know, October, we'd like you to record all the species that you can. And then something like iNaturalist will collate all of that data and put it together so that you've got a really good picture of what species are present at this time of year, kind of snapshots in time. So a more longer term project is taking a whole area. So you could get the community engaged by saying, we want to find out how many species there are in your parish, or in several parishes together, or in the whole of Mid Devon. It doesn't really matter. The whole of Dartmoor, it could be anything. And then saying in a longer term, so for example, for the whole year, we're going to see how many species we can collect, and then put that data together. So that's a more kind of longer term engagement project. And then there's kind of two main ways that you could do it, although I'm sure you could come up with many. One is the more kind of pencil and paper way, so just creating a list of exactly what you see and then manually inputting it. And that's still, a completely valid way of doing things. It just might be easier to use some of the technology if you're kind of more au fait with it. Or, oh gosh, I don't know, I haven't updated the text there. Or use something like iNaturalist, which I'll be showing you shortly, which is a really handy app, completely free of charge, which I think is fairly user-friendly. So I'll show you on screen in a second how to set up a project and collect your data from it, and sort of what that data looks like at the end of your project. So I'm not going to go on to this for a second, because I am going to just go out to a different screen. So now we're flicking over to iNaturalist itself. So if you go to the website inaturalist.org, you can set up your own login, and there's slightly different capabilities on your smartphone compared to your desktop computer. So, for example, setting up a project, which I'm going to show you how to do now, is something which you can't do on your phone, but you can do it on your computer. However, you can access and use the project once it's set up from any device. So that's an important thing to note. If you're looking on your phone and you can't find how to add a new project, that's because you can only do it on a desktop computer. So this is kind of what the homepage looks like. Has anybody used iNaturalist before? No, Chris has. Oh, brilliant. I can't see all of you. But hopefully a few of you have used it.
Use it a lot with help with moth identification.
Oh, brilliant.
But it has some drawbacks, but it's useful.
Well, that's great. So if you have anything which you you feel needs to be pointed out, please do let me know, because I'm by no means an expert on iNaturalist. Teresa, have you used it as well, or were you more?
Yeah, I've just used it on a personal level, and I've joined other people's projects. Like there's one on Exmoor for reporting invasive species.
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting as well.
Yeah, and it's actually great seeing other projects that that are available, because it might inspire you to do something on in your parish that's based on those, and you can kind of contact people who are running that and find out more information. So there's loads of really good aspects, but I'm not going to go into the details of iNaturalist, but we might have a session on that at a later date. But today I'm just going to be talking about setting up a project. So kind of to familiarize yourself. I've just set up this. It's not my actual account. It's just a Wildlife Warden one, just to give you an idea. So it's got all the kind of obvious things. This is your home page, so it's giving you some ideas of sorts of things which could be found locally to you. It's telling you some local people that are obviously counting lots of species. This guy looks, it's pretty keen, 4,166 species. And it kind of gives you lots of things which you can look at if you kind of dig into it. And you can follow them, like I say, much like any of the kind of social media platforms. There's also kind of forums for discussion on this side here. So you can get the support, lots of support there, and that'll then give you kind of ideas, although I'm sure lots of you are looking in the ideas department. Then yeah, sort of profile, it talks about who you are. Observations, so I actually haven't added any on this account, but you can see how simple it is. It just records number of observations, species, identifiers and observers. So it kind of gives you all that you need. But what I'm going to focus on today is this tab here on the very right hand side, which is projects. So this is the most useful thing when it comes to thinking about how to set up your Bioblitz. I'm sure there's loads and loads of ways of doing Bioblitzes, but this is the one which I've talked to several people, and this is the one which I think is quite good and useful start. So I've set up a project. I live at Farley, so the Farley Bioblitz. We've been collecting species for ages on a spreadsheet, so at some point I'm going to have to shift them all over to iNaturalist. I'm pretty sure you can import them quite easily, so that will be easy. But basically, this will be its own project with how many species I'd record at the property Farley. I haven't added anything on here, but you can see that this dashboard is kind of useful for for what you're going to see, and I'll give you an example of what you will see by the end of it in just a second. So I mean, that's essentially it. You can add members here. So for example, if you're setting up your Bioblitz, and you might ask everybody at the beginning to download the app onto their phone, and then you can add them on to your particular project, and then you've all got access to what observations have been found in your Bioblitz. So say it was Newton St Sire's Village Green, then you would have that as a title. You'll be focusing on that particular area, and I think you can set parameters around the location, but we'd have to kind of investigate a bit clearly. But you can see that you can easily edit your project in terms of what you see. So you can include specific taxa, you can include specific places, and you can include specific users. And then there's lots of kind of ways that you can say which date you're going to do it. If you're going to do an hour between 11 and 12, then it would only include what's been collected between 11 and 12 and add that onto your kind of database. And then it gives you kind of things that you can do or allow your community to have access to. And then again, if you want to do another thing and you don't want to type all this in, then you can just duplicate this project, and I could just say Farley Bioblitz November or whatever. If you wanted to do a seasonal Bioblitz, for example, which might be quite a good idea. So if you look at, So if I wanted to add a species, I don't know, go back to my project. Here it is. And then I want to say that I've seen something. Then it will all kind of show up exactly here. So when you add it, hold on, I'm not making any sense. So if you go back to your home page, and then you say what you've seen, then it will kind of automatically add it onto the project. That's what I'm saying. So it should be quite simple to use. And what I'd really like to do is try it out in the field, or at least if you guys might like to try it, kind of set up your own project, for example, your garden, and see how it operates, and then kind of feedback to me, because I think there's only so much kind of talking about how to collect things that, you know, that only goes so far. And I think the most useful thing is just to fiddle around with it and see what you can find, and what you what you come across and what you get stuck on. And I think that's the best way of kind of engaging with the app and with how to do it. So again, this IDs tab on your actual app on your phone, it'll give you kind of lists and pictures of what what you can see, and it can be really useful. So I'd really like you to download it if you think it's a tool which might be useful, and kind of see how you go with it. So I just want to show you what it comes up with at the end. So this is one that was done by our junior wildlife warden coordinator, and she did 1 hour in Bampton at a specific place, which was a public place. She got a whole lot of families there. They all had the app downloaded on their phones in advance. She had a few refreshments, and in that 1 hour they managed to capture 176 species. So I mean, pretty impressive. And you can see in all sorts of different taxa, from fungi to birds, arachnids, and then obviously the majority is plants. So it gives you kind of really useful insights afterwards, which is an obvious visual display of what you can find. So it's all quite useful, simple stuff. So going back to my little presentation. So basically, these are the things to remember when you're trying to sort of have your event go smoothly and get what you expected out of it. So I think always to keep in mind is, why are you doing it? What is it? Just to collect species? Is it to collect species that are going to be good enough for a citizen science project, or good enough for the Biodiversity Records Centre? Or is it just for interest? Is it for engagement? Or is it for a multitude of those things? So it's really good to kind of have that in mind, because what you're doing it for might be very different from what the people in your parish are doing it for. They might be just doing it for a good day out to see what's there for kind of surface level interest. But I think it's useful just to appreciate that people might be there for different reasons and who you're targeting. So that's the kind of who for element. Have you pitched it towards children? Have you pitched it towards experts, or just anyone in the parish? And if that's the case, you need to give really clear instructions as to who it's for, what support they need, what they need to bring, and have somebody there who can go around and help people with data collection, whether it is using field guides and paper or using something like iNaturalist. And then, of course, using this dashboard information, this insights sort of diagram, it's really good to use that as a tool to engage people further. So you'll be able to share this and use it as a basis for their understanding and appreciation of what's there. So you might be able to do things like saying, oh, we found 176 species. I did a bit more research afterwards and found out that 3 of those were vulnerable species, and this is the habitat that they like. And this is amazing that we found this, because now we can do these things to protect it going forward. So it's more than just the event. It's kind of communicating with those people outside of that event to kind of encourage them to be more involved in environmental projects going forward. So kind of finally, coming to support from the Wildlife Warden scheme. I'm really keen for your projects to get the community engaged and get more volunteers and get more interest in the wider parish, because I hear all the time that these projects are ambitious, which is great, but that it always lands to the same sort of people. And I think there is a slight disconnect between knowing who in the parish has skills which could help enable these projects and facilitate progress. And sometimes there's an assumption that those skills are known within a parish, but actually there might be people waiting in the wings with all sorts of different skills which would be valuable to your project. So this sort of exercise is one which can engage people with all sorts of skills that you might need in your wider work. And it's really good to have kind of community engagement beyond your kind of environmental group or your kind of small core, because ultimately these take a lot of man hours, and if you can spread the workload, then you're kind of achieving lots of things, because you're engaging people in nature, you're upskilling them, you're getting people a reason to be sociable, you're seeing that they can appreciate wildlife where they are. It's all quite basic stuff, but altogether it's a pretty magical mix. So I don't know if you had any ideas on how I might be able to support you and your projects. If you might be keen to do a Bioblitz, you might want additional support, in which case you are more than welcome to contact me anytime. If I can and you would like me to be, I'm happy to be present and sort of helping in some capacity at the event. So please don't be shy in kind of coming forward and seeing how you might need additional support. And if anybody has any ideas now, then do speak up or do email me kind of afterwards. Teresa, did you have something to say?
No, just a quick thought. Do they need access to like internet signal to be able to use iNaturalist in the field? Do you know? Just because this village, it's just awful for mobile signal. You've basically got to be at home on your Wi-Fi.
I think it's got offline capability.
Okay, that's good.
So, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
You might not have full access to all of the keys. So it's useful to have some kind of books that you can look up there. But
Yeah,
that's a very good point. I mean, it's designed for people in the field.
Yeah. but I guess they can take a photo on their phone anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Upload it later on. Yeah. In worst case scenario, they can't access the app in the field. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's bound to be some sort of technology issues. There always is.
Oh, there's definitely. Yeah.
Exactly. Did anybody have any more kind of thoughts, ideas about bioblitzing, or how I can kind of support you?
I think that when we have our next meeting, which I can't remember the date of, Kim might know, I'm going to suggest that we talk to you about that, and whether that would be something that we could do as part of the nature recovery group, or the wider community for that matter. I mean, it's such a new group that there's probably half the people in the parish have no idea that it even exists yet, because they don't necessarily read the parish magazine. So yeah, I'd like to, with your agreement, put that forward so that we talk to you later on about doing something that you could help us with.
Absolutely. I'd be more than happy to kind of get that kick started.
Brilliant.
I just think, and it might have been born from working on environmental projects in the National Trust for a long time, but sort of also baselining your village. I mean, it's a good place to start, and you know, it's slightly aside from bioblitzing, but it's a point of, you know, it's a point of interest, and it's a way of starting that kind of baseline information. And if you can follow it up with a habitat survey or an extended habitat survey, then that's a really useful starting point, because you can then measure and evaluate your impact over the years. And you know, that's more desirable if you're thinking about things like funding and trying to kind of make a case for why you need more support in your village on this thing. So doing a baseline is really, really key. And if every parish in Mid Devon managed to do some sort of baseline and see what habitats were there and what needed supporting, I mean, that would be a massive win.
If we're going to get people to start by doing, say, their own bioblitz in their own garden, do we want them to record the sort of garden plants as well as the weeds, as it were? Because if we want to encourage wildlife, for instance, all the different flower shapes and flower seasons and all the rest of it, that's all going to help with pollinators, isn't it? It's all going to help with
gardens are a
so,
habitat in their own right.
So do we ask them to record all the different flowers they've got, all the different actual things in their shrub borders, and not just the things in what might be a hedge? Or yeah, I would.
Okay. I mean, it depends what you're kind of doing, what the purpose of doing it is, whether it's just kind of get people thinking about, you know, their kind of wilded areas in their garden, or thinking of the garden as a whole habitat. But I think
well, we're talking about biodiversity, aren't we? So it's got to be the whole garden, I'd have thought, because things like
exactly,
you know, log piles and ponds and what have you, but also all the things that you plant, so there's a whole season's worth of nectar, not just a couple of months in the middle somewhere.
Absolutely. And I think it's kind of accessible to everybody, because no matter what their garden is like, whether it's a huge garden with loads of species and it's sort of highly gardened, or if it's just a kind of space with lawn and a small border, it doesn't matter, because, you know, you're again getting that kind of baseline data. And if they went back and did that,
I think it might make it more personal for them and give them a vested interest in making it more diverse one way or another. Because if they did something this year and they saw that it affected the diversity next year, it might be a way to get them hooked, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really good idea. It's really personal. And like you say, they might have a project like putting in a pond in their garden, and then they could measurably see what the difference is, rather than kind of just anecdotally. So yeah, very good idea.
Okay.
Yeah, so do let me know kind of progress on that. So yeah, sort of things that are coming up. Apologies for being a little bit vague on locations, etc. And I know that there's been one iteration already of this thing, but it's quite a condensed program because I wanted to make the most of the fact that we're still in the summer season. So apologies if there's a fairly short lead time up to these things, but no doubt there'll be a chance to kind of revisit some of these ideas. So we've already had a hedgehog talk by Stephen Powles, which was great. He had some brilliant videos of hedgehogs and a scheme called the Hedgehog Highway Scheme. So this is simply putting a hole in your border fence, the size of a DVD or CD, which can allow hedgehogs access. And I've got to admit that I used to think it was a little bit of a gimmick, just putting those holes, but he had really good footage of hedgehogs using them. He had kind of GPS data of where hedgehogs moved, and I wasn't really aware of their range, but it's actually quite big, and the impact of those hedgehog highways is really quite high. It stops them from going on the roads, becoming roadkill. It encourages people, again, an engagement exercise, encourages people to be aware of what's in their garden, and so that's something to get involved with if you can. It's thinking about how to help hedgehogs in your garden, but also in your wider community. So if you would like help on setting up on learning more about a hedgehog highway scheme and how to protect hedgehogs in your gardens, then please shout, because I just think it's a really simple way, again, of getting the message out and getting people to be aware of what's literally in their backyard.
I went to that talk the other night, and it was really, really excellent. It was fascinating, and even people there who already knew quite a lot. I think we all learned a great deal and saw some real examples of how communities have come together over this particular species, which does fire up people's imaginations, and it is a very special species to many people. So I think that's got real potential for bringing communities together. It was a really great talk, and if you ever get a chance to hear Stephen do that talk, then do join in, because he's very knowledgeable, and it was smashing.
Yeah, it was. I was really captivated the whole way through. So thank you, Jenny, for that. That's really clear insight. And like you say, getting communities together, this is a win. Is a win for communities, is a win for the wildlife, because hedgehogs are sort of vulnerable status. So they're definitely worth protecting. On 1st of September, we've got this intro to Phase 1 Habitat Survey. You might be sick of Zoom by then, but it is something will hopefully, again, like I said, be a proper introduction to what Phase 1 Habitat Survey is all about, and hopefully will be the first part of a kind of winter series of Habitat Survey sort of sessions, which will hopefully involve the DBRC in future, and we'll kind of get you survey ready by the time the season kicks off again next spring. A few of the other things, we've got to Ask a Farmer panel discussion. So I've organised for a few farmers to come and chat to wildlife wardens or keen people who want to learn a bit more about farming and the challenges that farmers are facing. And it really is a forum for asking farmers any questions. So that hopefully will be a good opportunity to just chat to people in a way that you won't feel like you're not knowledgeable about it, because that's what they're there for, and kind of get an understanding for what the pressure that farmers are under, and what some of them are already doing for nature and wildlife, and what to look out for and how to engage with farmers. So I'm quite excited about that one. Also thinking about sustainable gardens and floristry on the 15th of September. 22nd of September, hopefully getting the DBRC involved, but it's still a little bit up in the air. And then the 29th of September, we're kind of going to do an ideas sharing and launch session with a guest speaker. So that is when we'll kind of properly kick off the Mid Devon Wildlife Warden scheme, and hopefully get a lot of enthusiasm for the scheme across the wider area. But that you'll be hopefully come away with some useful things this evening. Thank you very, very much for joining. So I don't know if you are on Facebook, but if you are, we have a group which I post on fairly regularly, and other people kind of chip in, and you can get to it just by searching Mid Devon Wildlife Warden Scheme. There is a WhatsApp group should you want to be part of that conversation via WhatsApp. You can email me anytime on the wwcoordinatormiddevon@gmail.com, and I can offer you support through that. There'll soon be a website which I promise will be available for kind of lots of literature and points of contact next month, so September. And also my phone number's not on here, but I suspect you already have it. And do just contact me. Also, if any of you can submit any pictures of what you're doing or video records of what you're doing in projects that I can share across to other parishes, any stories on sort of success stories or challenges that you're working on, please let me know, because I am trying to kind of position myself as the link between parishes. So there might be another parish which is slightly more at a kind of more advanced stage of the project that you're trying to do, so you might as well just collaborate. So do use me as a kind of central point of contact there. Whew. Well, I think it is probably time that I close. So if there are any, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but thank you very much everyone for participating. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and stop the record, and then we can have any questions.